Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Keep your questions coming in. They are good. I keep you anonymous. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com and every social media network you can think of, right? Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, everything. Google Plus, even though I don't think people use it anymore. Google Plus. Alright, so here's today's question. Here's another question I received today. It said, I have read that a small percentage, about 10% of clinical sites, actually use social media as an avenue of recruitment or even self-branding, but many don't join social media because of the fear of the FDA IRB. How would you defend your position of using social media for both recruitment and self-branding without getting reprimanded from either the IRB or the FDA? I've heard you state to keep social media generic. Do you ever seek IRB approval for social media? So let me get into these questions, okay? First of all, you don't need, just because you're a research site, does not mean you need an IRB's approval for everything you do, okay? If you hire a recruiter, do you need IRB approval for that recruiter? If you, there's a number of activities you can do. If you go to a health fair to discuss your research clinic to the community, do you need IRB approval? No. Okay, so why would joining social media be any different? As long as you keep it generic and you're just branding yourself, branding your company, branding the type of trials that you do, and making your brand an expert and the go-to source for that medical condition or conditions in your geographic area, you do not need IRB approval for this, okay? IRBs are meant to protect study participants from undue influence and coercion, amongst other things. Marketing yourself, branding yourself, it falls well outside of their jurisdiction. Also, the FDA doesn't have any involvement in these kind of things. This is an IRB issue. If the FDA notes that an IRB ad was supposed to be used and you did not use it, let's say you modified it and used your own without getting approval, that would be a finding. But these kind of things are common sense. I mean, you do need IRB approval if you get into study specifics or specific things about a particular study that you're recruiting for. You don't need IRB approval if you're just promoting your brand and positioning yourself as an expert in the community. And just to be safe, you can put a disclaimer on the bottom that would say something along the lines of, we specialize in clinical research study. This is not considered medical treatment. For medical treatment, you may need to seek your own physician's approval. Something along the lines of that. Talk to your legal department about this. But the IRB, first of all, even if you were to get one of your generic social media pieces of content IRB approved, which IRB are you going to go to? Okay, are you going to go to all of your IRBs that you have? You might have 5 or 6 or even more studies. Are you going to go to every single IRB for every single study and get approval? Or are you just going to choose one at random? Or are you going to choose the ones that therapeutic indication or that medical condition would fall under? I mean, why do that? Plus, they probably won't even approve it if they see that it's not their study. So for that, you may have to pay your own IRB, find a private IRB. I've done this before, by the way. Pay them a fee. Usually it's like $400 to $800 to approve something. And now you have a generic approved piece of content. But the point of social media is to be engaging and to produce content regularly. So if you go that route, you're going to need IRB approval for every single piece of content. I think that's just ridiculous. As long as you know the gray area, which is starting to talk about compensation, and if you're starting to talk about particular study specifics for an individual trial, or if you start talking about how this medication has a bunch of benefits and like 0 risks, so if you're like embellishing the truth, I wouldn't do that. But the type of content I recommend you create is not even necessarily about research. Just talk about a medical condition like asthma. There's so many things you can talk about and associate that with your brand. People are not dumb. They're going to figure it out that you're doing research studies, okay? So the point is, first, brand awareness. I don't think you need IRB approval for that. Actually, I know you don't need IRB approval for generating brand awareness for your company. Now, again, specific trials, totally different. So that's the route I would go with this. Do you have a video solely on advertising, as it seems very ambiguous at the moment? I know we can't state protocol information, but what exactly can you state and what can't you do? So when it comes to, again, social media advertising, and social media is just a synonym for the internet right now, right? It used to be called Web 2.0, now it's called social media. Again, specific landing pages, for example, or if you're converting a flyer, most studies provide you with a pre-approved flyer that you can convert into a web page, but those kind of things don't really do well on social media. Those do well on things like ads. You may run that as a Facebook ad. It's already IRB approved. But what I would do is generate a piece of content around your medical condition and just talk about that. Make it something where someone would want to read it, first of all, and then click on it or comment or share it, or eventually end up contacting you, and you want them associating your brand with that therapeutic indication, right? So your other question is, we have had some advertisements offline that seem very generic and still do not get approved by the IRB. So if they're very generic, I'd have to know exactly what that would mean. If there's anything about compensation, the IRB would look at that as possible coercion. So when I generate pieces of content about research, I don't mention compensation in it at all unless it's already IRB approved. Then I can put exactly what the compensation is. But you can say things like reimbursement for your time and travel will be approved. All right, if you're running, like, let's say a Craigslist ad. Okay, so people get way too hung up on this IRB approval stuff. It's important. The IRBs serve a very important role in this industry, but to use that as an excuse to not get on social media, or to be fearful of getting on social media because of an IRB, is ridiculous. All right, I don't think you should do that. I think what you should do is look at some of the other brands and research. Like, look at Quintiles' Twitter feed. Look at Parexel, PPD, Covance. Look at their Twitter feeds and look at the type of content they produce. They don't even go necessarily after study participants, but you want to find the ones that do produce content for study participants at times, and then try to emulate that, but tweak it so that it makes sense for your audience, all right, and your therapeutic indication. Lastly, and this one I found very interesting, have you heard of sponsors not giving you a study because you're advertising a trial which the sponsor is looking to give out? For example, if you're advertising, you have an acne study going on, would the sponsor with an acne study overlook you just because they feel like you would not be able to work on 2 acne studies? So they will ask you in the feasibility questionnaire, how many other trials are you conducting or planning on conducting that could possibly compete with this trial? So answer those truthfully. Now, to say, will they go as far as like stalking you online or on Craigslist to see if you're advertising for other trials? Maybe, if they're like a large enough company. No, actually, I take that back. Maybe if they're a small enough company to where they actually care about that kind of stuff, they would. I could totally see a biotech doing this. I don't see a big CRO doing this or a big pharma doing this. They just don't have the time to be doing that kind of stuff. Their resources are focused elsewhere, namely on things like remote monitoring and risk-based monitoring. But I do see maybe a sponsor doing this, like a small biotech, especially if the medical indication is very niche. So they're looking at what sites are conducting these trials. But it might also help you. These biotechs, they're new to research. They don't know all the sites in your area that conduct studies that they're working on. So that you might find a new customer because of it. So it works both ways. Just be truthful in your feasibility questionnaires, and for the most part, they won't be stalking you online. All right. Thanks for your questions. They're good ones. This is Dan from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.